There's two key questions I think once you answer in your life, honestly, it makes decision making so much easier.
Leadership is everywhere. In our work, in our family, in our community. We see leaders by their actions. We know their legacy. This podcast is about leaders, people just like you, doing amazing things every day. I hope these stories inspire you, they motivate you, and they fuel your leadership legacy. My name is Vicki Guy. Welcome to Ignite.
Hi, and welcome to Ignite. I know that you have heard stories of famous people who have overcome odds to achieve greatness. Franklin Roosevelt, paralyzed from the waist down, went on to become a 4-time elected president of the United States. Oprah Winfrey, born into poverty, raped as a young girl, has become a major force in broadcasting. Bethany Hamilton, at age 13, was bitten by a shark and lost her arm, only to later win the national championship in women's surfing. Stories like this are definitely inspiring. And today our guest, the owner of Fearless Health Coaching Company, has too overcome all odds. At birth, his mother was told that he would never walk. Now, he is an ultra-endurance athlete, running 100 miles at a time. This is just one example how he has shoved obstacles out of his way. In just a moment, we'll be back to talk to Andy Farina.
My name is Dana Morrison. I'm the IT director at Grace Christian School in Raleigh, North Carolina. IT directors often hoard so much knowledge that it's hard for their team members to learn. IT Pro TV has given us the ability to level up our technicians to a point where they can decide this is important for me to learn. I would recommend IT Pro TV to any IT team. It's just a great tool for any IT professional.
Welcome back to Ignite. Today we are joined with Andy Farina. He is a husband, a coach, a father, and an ultra-endurance athlete. He's also a visionary and has lots of great stories to tell us today. Andy, welcome to Ignite. How you doing?
Hey, Vicki, great to be here with you. Gosh, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Absolutely.
Doing great.
Thanks. You know, when you and I first met, you told me some really amazing stories, and all of the stories that you told me, I mean, I was just kind of blown away by how over time, again and again, in any role that you've played, you've been able to overcome a lot of odds throughout your life. So I thought we would just first jump into a couple of those stories about some of the odds that you've seen, how they've shown up in the different roles that you play in your life.
Well, that's great. The thing about odds is it implies something, and it implies, either you're on the plus side or the minus side. Well, mine started 57 years ago today at my birth. And
happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you very much. The years keep coming, and I'm grateful.
Thank goodness, yeah.
But you can imagine, mothers love their babies. And of course, an Italian mother loves her son. So you can imagine her shock and horror when the doctors come in. I was born 7 weeks early, and the doctors come in and say to my mom, your son will never walk.
Oh.
And so the odds against me started very young. I had some deformity in both my legs, which the doctors felt I would not recover from, and would therefore I would not be able to walk. And so they put me in casts and braces for about the first 5 years of my life, and then in corrective shoes. Now, my earliest memories are just the shoes. I remember asking my mom as a child when I'd be able to wear regular shoes like the other kids. But the good news is that I was able to walk, and the doctors upgraded me to, well, he'll walk, but he'll walk with a limp. And then I was upgraded to, he'll walk, but he won't be able to run. Mm-hmm. And then I kept kind of defying the odds as I grew as a child, and I was able to start to run some, but it was very awkward and very problematic. but I just, as a child, I just believed you got to keep pressing forward. It wasn't like anybody told me, and I can't really take any credit for it, but, you have that innocence as a child. And, to my family's surprise, that was my first experience of overcoming the odds, though, again, I can't take credit for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you should take some credit for it for sure, because you're the one that had to kind of live through that. And as a young child, I imagine that had a huge impact on how others treated you, how you were perhaps socialized as well. So what was it? What impact did that have on you in your formative years? Did it create a difference between you and your peers, or did you just kind of roll with it like, this is just who I am?
Well, it definitely created an underdog kind of view of myself. I grew up in a neighborhood in New York, out on Long Island, where sports were huge, and every kid my age was playing every sport, and I was like the kid who always got picked last, and was always struggling to perform. And so where I did excel in that point in my life was in academia and in music. I was a classical musician growing up, and played in a number of orchestras in New York and things like that, and became very accomplished at the time. But I knew I was always behind the eight ball. So in some ways that it impacted me to the point where I always had to fight for whatever I wanted to accomplish, and whatever dreams I had, I really had to keep at it. And I was always very consistent, no matter how well or poorly I was doing in a given area. So I think that was the main shaping thing. Is you've heard the phrase stubborn Italian. Well, that's kind of the way I grew up. I was just a stubborn Italian and just kept trying and kept playing sports and kept working at music and kept working at my education.
Part of your fiber, it sounds like, from a very early age. I mean, you said you were classically trained as a musician. You've played in orchestras. I mean, that's not really an easy thing for anyone to do at any particular age. And oftentimes when we achieve that type of thing, that's enough. But for you, it just wasn't. You just kept pushing on, and it just seemed you're not. You may be a musician by hobby today, but certainly you're not playing in an orchestra. So you pushed through that and said, "That's not really what I want to do. I want more, something different." How did that evolution take place for you as you were growing up and realizing, you know what, I want to become what people have told me that I couldn't be?
Right. I mean, that's one of the main themes of my life is, we're surrounded by people, and sometimes well-intending people like the doctors with my mom. I mean, they didn't want to have to communicate. He can't walk. But, people, whether, kindly or maliciously, often tell us things. Odds makers, I like to call them, because everybody kind of evaluates and says what you can and can't do. And, I believe that we really do need to take a look at what's inside us and be honest about it, and look at the good that is there, and believe in yourself, and deal with the not so good that's there, if it's going to hinder you from becoming the best version of yourself. So I work with clients all the time through my coaching company, Fearless Health, whether business clients or athletes or individuals. And, my big thing is, let's find out what's holding you back so you can become the best version of yourself. Because once we find that, then you can really flourish. And so this reminds me of a story when I was working as an electrical engineer. I was in defense contracting and state-of-the-art electronics design for almost 10 years. And I was an engineer during the late 80s and early 90s, when they were very turbulent times for engineers in the defense world, because contracts were not as abundant, and so it was feast or famine. You were either working an ungodly amount of hours or you were getting laid off because there were no projects for you. Well, I was laid off 3 different times, which was extremely difficult early in my career as an engineer, and could really, really shook my confidence in many ways. I think one time it was definitely my fault. I did not perform the way I needed to. And the other 2 times was just circumstances and contracts. But I finally landed a really good job in a great company of about 2,000 people. And I was on the top project in the company at the time, and I was critical path. So if I didn't meet my milestones every 2 weeks, other people would lose their jobs because we wouldn't meet production schedules, and then they would be penalized by the government and people would lose their jobs. So it was a ton of pressure. So the company put on mandatory 70-hour work weeks. And I knew that I don't work well because I have such varied interests, if I have to just work at one thing all the time. So I went to my boss and I said, could I work just 50 hours a week? Because I know I will work at a high level. And for reasons that I don't fully understand, because it was a big risk on his part, he said, okay. And so what ended up happening, to make a long story pseudo short, was I worked 50 hours a week while other engineers were working 70. And I got ridiculed because I was leaving 2 hours before everybody else. And, they're like banker's hours and things like that, making fun. But the project, my portion of the project, integrated into the overall design beautifully. We met every milestone. We came in way under budget because I wasn't billing as many hours as the other engineers. And it was a huge success. The great thing about that was it was in an area for me that was not strong. So you have to be able to know that if you're not in an area of strength and you're going to take that kind of risk, you have to know that you have these other qualities to overcome whatever deficits are there and move forward to meet the objective and be successful. And, for the benefit of not yourself, like in that case, I was also fighting for the jobs of others. So I think whatever we do, we need to know what's inside, and we need to make sure what we're giving is going to benefit all involved. I just believe that, and that has helped me to overcome the odds throughout my journey.
Yeah, it's so interesting because in business, and by the way, you added another layer, being an engineer. So now I'm just even like more in awe, right? But adding that layer, and then in business, oftentimes we sometimes do second guess ourselves. Do we know enough? Can we do a good enough job? Do we have the resources that can make things happen? So what you're saying is that you spend a lot of time, and probably in your coaching today, you spend time with your clients to help them understand what is inside of them and how can they pull that out to be successful. Is that pretty accurate?
I think that's astutely accurate. Good job. In that, I find that with people, most people are not affirmed in who they are in my experience. Like, people are quick to criticize, people are not quick to affirm their strengths. And I believe everybody has strengths and everyone has weaknesses. And so what we need to do is identify our strengths and make them towering strengths, to borrow the phrase from Jim Collins' Good to Great. And then we need to be protected from our weaknesses by bringing in people around us who are strong in our areas of weakness that can help us accomplish the objective. And so it's always a team effort. Everybody has something to contribute. But I find that a lot of leaders and influencers don't take as much time that is needed to reflect upon their lives and their story and see what they can do and leverage those strengths to accomplish far greater than they ever could just sticking with status quo or what's expected, and certainly not listening to the odds makers. I don't encourage anybody to listen to the odd makers because that's implying something, and it usually results in pride when you're the favorite or defeat when you're the underdog. And so I say, just don't listen to that. Listen to the key trusted wise voices in your life, whether it's internally to you or to mentors and coaches around you or to friends who care about you or family members. But there's way too many critics in the world. And to borrow from Teddy Roosevelt's Man in the Arena, don't listen to critics that are not in the arena.
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy. It's so easy to hear those voices because sometimes those drown out the positive voices. I mean, for myself, I can relate to what you're saying. I was the first person in my immediate family to go to college, and it was because everybody told us we couldn't do it. We couldn't afford it. We weren't smart enough. Whatever it was. And if I had listened to those voices, then I wouldn't be where I am today, which is I'm in a good spot. So I'm happy that I didn't listen to those critics. But I'm wondering, how do you get people, because it takes some kind of, I'm not sure if I was old enough at that point to know that that's what I was doing. But as an adult, once you're in business, how do you help people have that realization that, you know what, you're hearing the critics and those voices are drowning out what you really can bring to the table? So give us your Andy's magical coaching in terms of, without giving away too much, how do you get people to realize that and to self-reflect, to say, this is what I'm bringing to the table and I don't care what anybody says, this is what I'm going for? How do you do it?
Well, there's nothing really original with me, so I feel very free to give away everything I've got. And good for you, Vicki. I mean, similarly, I was the second person in my family to go to college out of a large Italian family. So I understand hearing I can't, and I had to put myself through school in the process. So I had no help, no support in that sense. So kudos to you for persevering and doing it. And you're in a great spot from everything I see and hear. But there's two key questions I think once you answer in your life, honestly, it makes decision-making so much easier. And they're not simple questions, but I spent several years reflecting on them. I may be a little dense and it probably took me way too long. Others may find out sooner or later, but the two questions are, you must answer, who am I and what do I really want? And I think when you answer those two questions honestly, you can rise up against a lot of challenges and keep pressing through. And I have found that to be true for myself and for many a client.
You make it sound so easy, but I know that those questions are definitely hard to answer. And oftentimes, like you mentioned, people don't take the time to really reflect with it. I wanted to move a little bit to talk about your ultra endurance athleticism. I know right now you have been running quite a bit. You run 100 miles at a time, right? You train incessantly to be able to compete in these, I guess, races or
Yes.
journeys. And going from somebody who was born told that they couldn't walk or they would never walk to being to an endurance athlete, what was it that made you say, I'm going to do this? And then how did that journey happen for you? Like, what did it look like?
Well, that's a great question. And I love to tell the story because I want to give all people hope. I've been training people in gyms for almost 30 years now. And so many people here are told they can't do this, they can't do that. Actually, I was told 4 separate times in my life that I will not walk or I might not be able to walk. So I'd like to tell the story about how I completed my first 100-mile race.
Yeah.
The first time I ran, I had a very serious back injury that kept me out of running for 18 years. The first time I came back to running, I ran a mile and it took me a week to recover. And I worked my way up to a 100-mile trail race in Alabama in the mountains that is about 16,000 feet of gain. So you're running up and down a lot and about 16,000 feet of loss. But the 2 weeks before that first 100-mile race, I injured my ankle in another race. And when I went into that race, I started the race, and at mile 1, I rolled that bad ankle really bad and proceeded to roll it 4 more times in the first 18 miles. So I kept going, and finally, there are cutoff times you have to meet throughout the race. I finally didn't make the cutoff time at mile 69. So I had to run 69 miles on a bad ankle.
Oh my goodness.
And, but because of the belief that, I know what's inside me, I know I can press through a lot, I thought, I'm not going to give this up. So I failed at that race. And the reason I tell this story is to say dreams which pull us into a higher orbit, don't come easy. So you can't give up. So what I did then was I recovered from the ankle injury for a few weeks, and I trained, and I ended up finishing my first 100-mile race 3 months later, which was a very special day because, being told that when you're born, you're not going to be able to walk. At 18, you got to stop running. You might not be able to walk. At 30, you got to stop running. You might not be able to walk. And then at 43, you got to stop running. You might not be able to walk. To overcome and defy the odds, I think is part of what ignites our best selves. I think we have to face what we fear and go after our dreams, no matter who says you can't. And I just believe God had kind of given me this gift to overcome, and I was going to keep using it, for the good of really the clients and all the people who look to me to inspire at times. I felt like I couldn't give up for them, that I had to keep moving forward. So I did complete that 100-mile race. And then I actually went back a year later and ran the race the only race in my life that I didn't finish at that point, and I completed it in 2018. So that was a great redeeming moment, crossing that finish line.
Well, Andy, over and over, these stories are definitely very inspiring. You don't just overcome obstacles, but you just knock them out of the way, right? And you just keep going. I'm wondering if, because not everybody's built that way. Sometimes, if I roll my ankle running, chances are I probably will stop. I'm not going to run another, 40
sure,
or 60
and many
miles.
times we should.
Right? But in business and in life and in everything that we do, we roll our ankles, right? We want to stop. What can we, to kind of wrap up our discussion, what can we share with people? What advice would you give to somebody when they do, quote unquote, roll their ankle in life and business, and they feel like they just want to give up, they want to stop? What advice would you give them to help inspire them to keep going, to overcome whatever obstacle has become, in their way?
Well, that's a great question. And I will say this: every race I do, every 100-mile or super long race I do, there are times when you always want to quit. And in life, I think we all have that thought, I need to quit. And I totally admit that not everyone is wired like me, or, like many of my friends who do similar things. But I will say this, I think we need to not undervalue the importance of having key people in our lives that can hold us up when we're wavering. I am not a fan of the rugged individualism that is often pervasive in our culture, where you have to do it yourself. I have never accomplished anything all by myself. Whether it's a loved one in your family, whether it's a friend, whether it's a mentor, whether it's a hired coach. Even though I have a professional coaching company and I'm coaching many clients, I have multiple coaches in my life for different areas. And I always surround myself with people that are strong in areas that I am not as strong in. So I contribute from my strength to their lives, and I can draw from their lives. And together we all become better. And when we all become better, I know this may sound really kind of corny and cheesy, but the world does become a better place. Our companies become better, our neighborhoods become better, and our families become better. So I'm a big fan of working together with people around you. And, if you don't have a friend that has an expertise in that area, get a coach, get a mentor. There's people in your lives that that are strong in those areas that can help you. Mm-hmm. People you trust. And if not at this time, they'll be there. Yeah. And there are biographies and books to read too, to inspire you to keep going, because you look at lives of like Abraham Lincoln and how many times he failed before he succeeded. He could have quit many times over. Mm-hmm. So I always tell people, don't quit. Mm-hmm. You may not make the time cut like in the race, but that's the reason why when I rolled my ankle 5 times in that race, I have a commitment that I will not quit. I may fail, and failure is okay because you learn from it, but I won't quit.
Some inspiring words from you, Andy. Thank you so much for joining us today on Ignite. We appreciate it, and I know that your clients and your friends and your network appreciates it as well. So thank you, and we hope to see you again soon on Ignite.
Well, it's been a real pleasure being with you, Vicki, and I can't say thank you enough for your kindness and your encouragement. And I sure wish you the best. And I know you're going to keep going even further. And I'm pulling for you.
All right. Thanks so much. In just a moment, we'll be back with some final thoughts on Ignite.
I'm James Packer. I'm the General Manager of Kirk ISS based in the Cayman Islands. I used IT Pro TV extensively in my last place. It grew very well, helped upskill the team. I had 110 engineers in the field, and we had dozens of IT Pro accounts with the guys training, and last year alone they passed over 40 certs by using the online training. I think I can safely say without IT Pro TV I wouldn't be where I was today, because I only got this job on the back of the qualifications I have.
Welcome back to Ignite. Overcoming the odds is not an easy task. But as we just heard from Andy, sometimes, even when the odds are 1 in a billion, you can be that one. Thanks for listening to Ignite. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and subscribe to us on YouTube or Apple Podcasts. From all of us at Ignite, we'll see you next time.